Well, welcome back. We're a small but select group, but I think we're about to be joined by yet more people. So make yourselves ready, make yourselves comfortable, and in just a moment we'll move on to our next session. A slight change to the program as originally published and reflected, I think, in your pocket guides, although the topic might be slightly different. So we've already seen that consumer behavior is changing, the way we consume media is changing, and that throws up challenges for media owners, but also for brands and advertisers. What happens to brand safety in a world where advertisers may feel they have less control than ever before over what content their brand appears beside, above, or below? And someone who knows a great deal about that is the chairman of advertising sales and client partnerships at NBCUniversal, Linda Yaccarino. And here to interview Linda is Lara O'Reilly, a reporter with the Wall Street Journal here in the UK. So please welcome Linda and Lara.
You in the middle, so
here or
that
here?
one, I think.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. As you just heard, I'm here with Linda Yaccarino, who runs ad sales at NBCUniversal. I just want to say, so I'm an advertising reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and there has never been a time, I think, when there have been so many advertising stories in the mainstream media.
Yes, absolutely.
But not only just that, so many kind of negative advertising stories in the mainstream media, and you only have to look at the front page of the Journal today and you can read all about Google and Russia. Does that, as a, working for a TV network, does that kind of embolden an executive like yourself and give you kind of more of a stick with which to hit those guys with?
Well, I think maybe I would use a different word than embolden. I think it would be more validate things we've been talking about for quite some time. So while you're right, every single day there is an article in any given newspaper. Today's Google's turn. It's been Facebook's turn for, the last couple of weeks. So I think it validates a company like NBCUniversal or a lot of our peers about really what's important about the power of premium content and television, and at my company, what we call going beyond the algorithm, that you can't just count on an algorithm or a machine to make these important advertising decisions. And now, unfortunately, a lot of the advertisers and the consumer, quite frankly, is ultimately being punished because of the lack of discipline in so many areas, and we've been talking about it with our clients for several years and warned them of what was likely to happen, and unfortunately it seems to just be a confluence of all those things coming together at once.
Mm-hmm. But that said, I mean, programmatic brings things like efficiency, speed.
Seemingly efficiency.
Right. But you can I can get an ad out to market far quicker with Facebook, say, than I can if I wanted to put it on an NBCUniversal channel.
That's true. But is your ad going where you really want it? Actually, I was reading a story today, a different story than the Google issues or challenges that they're having. I was reading something about bad actors, or what they call spoofing, I think that is called, that they're representing themselves, these ad networks are representing themselves as representing media that isn't exactly truly where they're telling the advertiser where their ad is going to go. Because it's all done by algorithm or the machine, you don't really know where your ad is going. So there's a couple things. You used an interesting word, efficiency. I think the lure of efficiency and data targeting is what caused the lion's share of the shifting away from premium content of television to digital. But what really has been happening at the end of the day, when you take what was perceived as that efficient CPM and you take out what the industry called, or has become very well known as the ad tax on digital, you're actually looking at a CPM that's anywhere from 30 to 40% higher when you take out things like fraud and viewability and bots, et cetera, you have to sift out what the advertiser is not getting, and then you have a CPM that is much more expensive, and most importantly, it's being married next to content that is completely inferior to the alternative of what they could have purchased. So I think right now it's a little bit of growing pains, but that's really what someone like me and my peers at other companies have the biggest challenges with, that it's a oops, I'm sorry, oops, we did it again, right? Not a Britney Spears song, but oops, we're sorry, the algorithm did it. And these are not small companies. Mm-hmm. And the lack of discipline and integrity on behalf of the clients, yes, but really most importantly, the consumer, where they're either being fed terrible fake news stories, or the advertiser is not given the real media that they were promised, is really an industry-wide problem. And I would suspect that you're going to see it in the headlines of magazines and newspapers continuing moving forward, because it's far from being fixed.
And how are you immunized from some of that? I mean, you talked about spoofing, for example. There's a lack of video content. Well, actually, no, there's a lack of premium, good digital content on the internet. So I can imagine, you know, some of your content might be, and some of your ad inventory might be an attractive destination for fraudsters.
Yes, and I think that we're immune to it primarily the way the transaction or commerce happens in television, that you're be able to fully be aware of any content that you're buying in advance. And there is no opportunity for you not to air in the program that you requested, because that's all negotiated. That being said, as we move more towards a digital world in our digital products that we have, like our linear programmatic tool that we have, you only surface inventory that's available for you to purchase, so you know what inventory is available. So there really is no opportunity, because we don't do business with the ad networks for this particular reason, that, you know, imagine a time, and we're very close to that, particularly at NBCUniversal, when you have the true scale of what the television universe can give you. Not the proposed scale of some of the other tech platforms, but the real scale and power of television. You have the content that no one argues that content is the most attractive content for an advertiser's message, but when we're on the cusp of having the data capabilities that are similar to or like what Google and Facebook has in terms of targeting, that's where we think we're at a point where it's kind of, you know, checkmate. We've got the content, the data, products, and the distribution. So I think it will, and that's what we call going beyond the algorithm. So that's where we think the magic is going to happen.
And you kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, but talk to me a bit about measurement. I know you've been quite a vocal critic of one of the biggest, well, the TV standard in the US.
Let's call it the only.
The TV rating standard in the US, Nielsen. And you've kind of said before that they've been too slow to put out decent kind of total audience numbers.
Yeah.
Then you have on the other side the big platforms like Facebook and Google saying that they have these huge audiences, you know, 1 million Super Bowls a day. Well, perhaps not that many, but several Super Bowls a day that watch their content, and it's kind of not that much of an apples to apples comparison.
Correct.
So what can you do there to prove not only the size of your audience, but also efficiency as well? We were talking earlier about efficiency, you know, that these ads actually work and do better than some of those platforms.
Well, I think in terms of efficiency, keeping in mind or a priority that efficiency is one of the most important priorities for our clients. That's kind of table stakes to make that a priority. But efficiency has to be on the same playing field as effectiveness, because what, again, appears to be efficient might not necessarily be effective at the end of the day. But that being said, being a critic to Nielsen, which right now is the only agreed upon metric in the US to conduct commerce in the linear side of the business. The reason we've been critical is because I would say it's at least 10 to 15 years behind consumer behavior. So if you can't capture viewing on every screen, and you can't capture viewing that's attached to similar IP or content anywhere, anytime, it's illogical to imagine that that's the only currency that can be used. On the flip side, in terms of digital, we feel that there's definitely a false equivalency that has emerged where a view is equal to a viewer. So we all know that a view or a like can't go into a showroom or make an actual purchase, but an actual viewer can be inspired by certain pieces of content or campaigns to actually go in and consume or purchase a product. So, you know, that's what we deal with most of all from this level. But when we talk about emerging currencies or emerging currencies, there's a lot of new companies that are emerging that NBCUniversal is working with that is either going to help create some competition where Nielsen hasn't had any in the past to get them to accelerate development to appropriately measure the audience, like a ComScore that's really good at the digital side, but catching up on the TV side. Nielsen is absent on the digital side, but okay at the linear side. But there's companies out there, for example, today we're working with a company called Data Plus Math that has a new tool coming out or that we're testing called Thor, and that is looking at opportunities to correlate buying attribution to television, because no one argues the power of premium content's influence on the most of the buying or purchase consumption funnel. But they largely what was thought about living in the top of the funnel or the middle of the funnel. But there's been many studies that come out, including a new one from Accenture that talks about TV having influence at least 25% on that bottom of the funnel or last click attribution that Google and Facebook or the tech platforms are like, we own it, we did it. So again, it's not about us versus them. It's about we, and how can we focus that a media mix that makes sense to help our customers sell more product. And right now, unfortunately, there's an imbalance in those consideration, and it's just a mess on the currency and measurement side. And NBCUniversal does not have the opportunity to grade our own homework or to give our customers, here's what you did, here's what your campaign did. We have to go through Nielsen. So that's why I think you're seeing a lot of the missteps on the YouTube and Facebook side, and you're seeing such a higher bar on television, and we're starting to fight back.
And is that going to be an industry-wide effort? It can't be something you do yourself because, again, the grade your own homework claims.
Yeah, I believe it will be an industry-wide effort, and you will continue to see NBCUniversal leading the change in the ecosystem. Unfortunately, we need some help from our agencies, and if there's any of our agency partners in the room, unfortunately, the inertia that has existed in the marketplace, we could use a lot more help and a lot more vocal opposition to the current situation that exists specifically in the US to actually move the industry forward and just tell Nielsen that it's time to stop. You got to get better.
I seem to remember Martin Sorrell's on your side. He talks about it a lot.
Yes, he certainly does.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, so a lot of the time when people talk about TV, they talk about TV being the slow movers, these kind of big giants that had it great for ages until kind of Google and Facebook came along. But I mean, we mentioned Sorrell there, for example. So what about the agencies themselves? Is some of this, the problems with digital currency and metrics, is some of this about kind of the way that agencies and clients themselves are set up as well? You know, you have a different person to buy TV and a different person that buys digital. I mean, weren't you criticised for bringing together your digital and TV sales teams at one point?
Yes,
I was.
Yes,
was that
exactly. Right? So hopefully I've shed the heretic moniker, but
how long ago was that?
About 5 years ago.
Okay, hopefully.
It was a very a simple and pure agenda to bring the company together as one portfolio, and it really came from how could we, A, get easier to do business with our customers, and in the face of audience fragmentation, whether it was from digital disruption or other demands on a consumer's time, we knew that coming together we could offer the advertisers a more scaled audience since we're the biggest media company in the US, and we thought bringing us together would be able to give them quicker access to the consumers they were looking for. So back then it really did challenge the legacy of agency client structure because we were talking about not only bringing all of broadcast and cable together, but also bringing broadcast, cable, and now digital together. So it's still challenging the legacy infrastructure of the agencies. But I really think what's part of the problem and why they've been complicit in the inertia and not helping change quicker is because they're under such financial pressure from their own clients, the marketers, that they're lured into the efficiency, which was a lot of smoke and mirrors by the digital companies. So how could they get lured into a company that didn't have a third-party verification from the measurement only because it seemed cheaper? So you had cheaper, and you also had subpar content. It would never imagine that that would have happened at any point in time in the history of media. So now that, unfortunately, sales aren't paying out and big customers are vocal about they need to get better, like a Mark Pritchard from Procter, and they've started to vote with their wallet. So this year's marketplace in the US was very, very strong for the television companies. And we're pretty positive that a lot of that came from the digital players just weren't paying out. No matter how they told their customers, they weren't playing out. It wasn't being demonstrated in their bottom line sales.
But NBCUniversal's made some pretty interesting investments in digital companies. I think probably the most high profile one is Snap.
Yes.
It's half $500 million, is that right?
Yes, we have a strategic partnership with them, and it was a $500 million investment.
So when are you going to start seeing some returns on that?
Well, I think we're seeing returns already, and while it's not all day, every day, we have an incredible relationship with them, and I point out again the most premium content that you could get worldwide, which is the Olympics. So we have also another very interesting investment with BuzzFeed. So what we're doing is bringing those two companies together and have BuzzFeed produce our Olympic content, which will be distributed on Snapchat. We were very, very successful in Rio, where we actually brought the BuzzFeed production team to Rio with us, lived with us for the 21 days that we were there in Rio, and produced content for Snap. So it was very, very successful, and advertisers really, really embraced it. And what we're trying to do is bring new generations into the love of the Olympics that brings families together, brings communities together around the Olympics, because NBCUniversal invested in that content until 2032 so far. So we actually are pretty excited about that, and advertisers really embraced it because obviously you can get on linear television every piece of the Olympics. We're airing everything live for what's coming up in Pyeongchang, but for a generation or a new generation of consumer that is probably going to capture a lot of content on the Olympics on their mobile device, it was very important for us to partner with the companies that do it best. So we're pretty bullish on our investments in BuzzFeed, Vox Media, that has a couple of different brands that work perfectly with NBCUniversal content and with Snap. And then we also have a relationship with Apple, where we represent 100% of the inventory on Apple News on over 100 million phones in the US. And Snap will also be delivering content to Apple News, and Apple will have Olympic content. So it's a pretty exciting time for us at the company.
It's really interesting. That went by in a flash, and this is flashing at me, so I think we're out of time. But one really quick last question. So going into 2018, what kind of technology trend are you most excited about? I hear a lot of talk, for example, about addressable TV. Yeah. Is that something that's going to come of age?
Yeah, we're actually very, very excited about, if you look at the assets of our company, if you're going to start a media company today, I would imagine that our company would have at least most of the assets to start a media company of the future. So a lot of what we talk about is bringing NBCUniversal and the addressable capabilities through our relationship with Comcast to the national level. So that's just one of the things we're very excited about. So imagine through premium content, if you could get the right ad at the right time on any channel that you're consuming any of our content. So in your neighborhood or your neighbor, you might get one auto ad and your neighbor may get a different auto ad. And that's really, we are really on the cusp of doing that. We could do it that in the VOD space right now in the Comcast universe, and we're really looking at expanding that on a national basis. And that's just one of the things we're excited about. But on the push from our agencies for full automation, we are working with a company that is actually the company that powers a lot of the digital companies, particularly Facebook's programmatic tools. So all of our inventory is available on a programmatic basis, including our sports properties, our broadcast network. So we're trying to make the transaction phase of what is kind of dogging television right now from being so manual and really putting our foot on the gas to go full automation and programmatically offered.
Exciting stuff. Everybody give a big round of applause for Linda Yaccarino at NBCUniversal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Lara.